Welcome to our Entitled People, where 5 Karens found out, in the most embarrassing way possible, that not every calm person is weak and not everyone in a hoodie is an employee available for verbal abuse. The first Reddit post is from Throwaway Blueberry. I'm 24 and I work at an artisan coffee shop that sells coffee. Expensive enough to make unbearable people feel aristocratic for 5 minutes. It was a Saturday morning, lined to the door. The espresso machine screaming like it was giving birth to an Italian demon, and me trying to train a new girl who was clearly already rethinking every life choice that had brought her there. That was when Brenda walked in, and yes, her name really was Brenda. The universe is sometimes too lazy to be subtle. Brenda showed up with giant sunglasses, hairspray stiff hair, and exactly the kind of energy that makes an entire room think, here we go. Trouble with gel nails. She went straight to the register and slapped a crumpled coupon onto the counter, like she was presenting a court order. The trainee looked at the coupon, looked at me, looked back at the coupon, and said, with all the gentleness of someone who still believed in human kindness, that it had expired 3 months ago. Brenda's eyes widened. Not in a normal way. In a cartoon character about to explode way. You do take these. You always take these. Don't waste my time. The girl tried to explain the store policy. Brenda cut her off. I stepped in to handle it, and that was when she decided I was the new villain in the soap opera playing inside her head. She started talking loudly, then louder, then at that very specific volume only shameless people use in public. She said I was incompetent. That service had gotten worse ever since they'd started hiring children and tattooed thugs, which was a fascinating choice of words considering there were 3 baristas to tattooed customers, and a delivery guy with an entire neck covered in skulls standing right there. I said, still calm, that I couldn't validate an expired coupon. Brenda then asked for the manager. I replied that he hadn't arrived yet. Technically true. The store manager had not arrived yet. Brenda smiled with the poisonous satisfaction of someone who thought she had just found a loophole. Great, then I'll show you what a real complaint looks like. At that moment, the woman sitting in the corner of the shop in a gray hoodie, black cap, and closed laptop stood up. I thought she was just another customer tired of the free circus, but she walked over to the counter and asked, in a quiet voice, if I could repeat exactly what Brenda had said to the new employee. Brenda turned to her and snapped, and who are you? Another old waitress trying to act important. The woman pulled a badge out of her pocket. Regional audit. I could almost hear Brenda's soul sliding down her spine. The woman was Melissa, regional operations manager. She had been doing surprise visits to the stores that week, out of uniform, specifically to observe service and the behavior of difficult customers. And because the universe loves a good public humiliation, Brenda had not only picked the wrong store, she had picked the wrong day and the wrong audience. Melissa asked for the security footage, asked for Brenda's customer history in the system. And guess what? Brenda had been using the same routine for months at different locations. Expired coupon, tantrum, demand for an exception, threat of a bad review, and in the end, compensation vouchers. A low-budget scam artist. Brenda realized the floor had disappeared beneath her feet and instantly tried to change her tone. She got soft, said it was all just a misunderstanding. That classic transformation from hyena to poodle. It didn't work. Melissa canceled the order, refused service, documented verbal abuse toward the team, and banned Brenda from every location in the region. Brenda then decided to take that extra step that separates embarrassment from total ruin. She grabbed her latte cup and threw it onto the counter. Only the coffee hit Melissa's arm, splashed the trainee, and showed up beautifully on camera. 5 minutes later, mall security. 10 minutes later, the police. And then came the moldy cherry on top. Brenda started screaming that she was being assaulted, that these girls were setting her up, that she had rights, that she knew a lawyer, that this would ruin our lives. A bold thing to say while standing next to a monitor showing her turning into a bucket of hysteria. From the minute she walked in, the update came 2 days later. Brenda posted in a local moms group saying she had been attacked by violent employees. But Melissa's niece was in that group. The video surfaced. The comments were glorious. People asked whether the coupon had also been expired for 3 months, or if only the shame was fresh. In the comments, someone wrote, imagine losing your right to buy cappuccino over a $2 discount. And honestly, our next Reddit post is from C. Gremlin. I'm a flight attendant, and this happened last month on a packed flight from Atlanta to Chicago. We had 1 passenger, let's call her Pamela, because it sounds like the kind of woman who has threatened to sue at least 3 waiters, and 1 nephew. Pamela boarded already looking like someone who considered rules a personal insult. The second she stepped onto the plane, she ignored the line, whacked people with her bag, and marched straight to row 2. Problem, her boarding pass said seat 180 economy, far away from where her imaginary nobility thought it deserved to exist. Only seat 2A was already occupied by a young woman in a black hoodie, hair tied back, no makeup, headphones around her neck, looking simply tired. Pamela stopped, looked at her, and said in a syrupy venom tone, sweetie, you're in my seat. The woman removed 1 earbud and answered, I don't think so. My boarding pass says 2A. Pamela let out that little laugh people use when they think arrogance counts as documentation. No, you don't understand. I need the seat. I'm a premium customer. You can go to yours, wherever that is. The passenger repeated, still calm, that it was indeed her seat. Pamela then called one of us over and launched into his speech. She said the woman looked like off-duty crew, that those people were always trying to take advantage. that she didn't pay good money to fly crammed in with lazy freeloaders. The young woman looked at me with such a serene expression that I almost felt sorry for Pamela. It was the face of someone who had probably seen things far worse than a blonde meltdown. Dressed in expensive perfume and desperation, I asked the woman for her boarding pass. It was 2A. Then I asked Pamela for hers. 18C. Pamela replied that this was irrelevant because she had status, that she needed to get off quickly in Chicago, and that the other woman didn't look like someone who needed that seat. And then, because God sometimes writes with a pen dipped in pure mockery, she added, "So what exactly is your role here, anyway?" The woman answered, "Captain." Silence, a clean, round, delicious silence. The passenger in the hoodie was one of our captains, dead heading to Chicago to operate another flight. No uniform, no audience, no interest in making a scene, just trying to sit in peace like any normal human being. Pamela went pale at an almost clinical rate, but it could still get worse, and it did. Instead of shutting up and accepting her social death, she decided to keep digging. She said she didn't believe it, that nowadays anyone says anything. So the captain opened the airline's internal app, showed her employee ID, and even recited her badge number. Pamela then had the breathtaking nerve to say, "Well, then you should set an example and give up the seat." I swear I saw a man in row 3 close his eyes like he was praying for enough patience not to commit a crime. By that point, the cabin supervisor had already been called, and since Pamela continued refusing her assigned seat, disrupting boarding, and insulting an airline employee, the decision came fast: removal from the aircraft. Pamela went into instant combustion. She said it was humiliating that no one treated a customer this way, that she was going to call the press, that she flew every week, that this was discrimination against assertive women, that men were afraid of strong women. You know, the full bingo card of public insanity. The best part? Her husband, who was an 18D and clearly lived in a marriage where asking for ketchup probably required legal counsel, said only, "Pam, sit in your seat." She did not sit in her seat. She was removed. And he stayed alone in silence in 18D next to a coughing teenager. The update came from the husband himself, who sent a complaint to the airline asking for compensation miles for the domestic stress caused by the incident. I wish I were making that up. But unfortunately, reality clocks in early and never takes a day off. In the comments, someone wrote, "She wanted so badly to fly above everyone else that she ended up back at the gate." Poetic. Economical. Deserved. Our next Reddit post is from Lawn Anderter. I moved into a gated community in Florida after my husband died. I'm 67. I have temperamental dachshunds, and I have zero interest in joining a wine club with women who call gossip community. I moved in quietly, bought my house, painted my front door dark blue, and went on with my life. That was when Nancy found me. Nancy was one of those Hoa Karens who had no visible job, but always seemed busy, as if she were personally managing NATO. She appeared on my sidewalk on the second day with a folder, an alligator smile, and a list of necessary adjustments, according to her. My porch planter was too big, my hose was visible, my dog barked with aggressive energy, and the blue on my door gave off a funereal aesthetic. My husband had literally just died, so maybe the door really was on theme. Still, I thought it was elegant of her to turn my grief into a fine in the first 2 months. Nancy left 7 notices in my mailbox, none of them official, all printed at home in Comic Sans with bold words like severe and violation. It looked like a PowerPoint had developed a personality disorder. I called the condo administration to ask about the notices. The woman who answered sounded confused. She said there was nothing formal on my record. Strange, right? Almost as if Nancy had been playing neighborhood dictator with printer toner. So I did what every tired, slightly resentful widow does when someone overplays their hand. I started documenting everything. Now, here comes the tiny detail Nancy didn't know. I had worked as a forensic auditor for 31 years. My entire career was basically listening to people lie confidently, and then destroying that confidence with spreadsheets. Nancy, poor thing, was the human equivalent of a badly forged receipt. I stayed polite. I kept accepting the papers. I kept photographing every notice, every envelope, every fake fine, every visit captured on my doorbell camera. And Nancy, puffed up by her own stupidity, got bolder. She started issuing fees. Said that if I didn't pay $300 for landscaping correction, she would send it to the HOAS legal department. That was when I asked, as sweetly as possible, how I was supposed to pay. She handed me a paper with AVNMO in her name. People, it wasn't even a good scam. It was neighborhood corruption on clearance sale. I could have taken it straight to the police. But honestly, Nancy had annoyed me for long enough that I wanted my revenge served hot, slow, and drenched in salsa made of humiliation. So I waited for the annual association meeting. Nancy loved the annual meeting. It was her Oscars. She showed up in a beige blazer, carrying a thick folder, and smiling like she had already rehearsed her acceptance speech. In the third person, when question time came, I stood up. By then, everyone saw me as the quiet widow with the blue door. Excellent disguise. I asked whether unofficial fines were a new policy. Nancy tried to interrupt, say individual cases should be handled privately. That was when I turned on the projector because yes, I had brought a flash drive. I showed the fake notices. I showed the envelopes with no tracking number. I showed the Venmo screenshots. I showed the doorbell footage of Nancy stuffing notices into my mailbox like a corporate raccoon. And while I was at it, I also showed a simple spreadsheet cross-referencing the amounts she had collected. from other elderly residents under labels like landscaping, standardization, and emergency. Administrative fee, total diverted, $18,420. Nancy started sweating out of her entire forehead, the whole treasurer, a balding man who always looked 1 minute away from falling asleep, literally removed his glasses and asked, "What the hell is Venmo?" The best part, I had warned the board in advance that I would be presenting possible fraud, and professionally suggested that they might want a courtesy police officer present, so there were 2 officers at the back of the room. When Nancy tried the old "this is harassment" routine, it didn't land. She was removed from the meeting screaming that I was a bitter manipulator, that widows living alone invent drama, that everyone would regret this. Exactly the sort of speech that only gets worse when said near a microphone. The update came a month later. Nancy was not only removed from the board, she was hit with civil lawsuits from residents and, according to extremely reliable neighborhood gossip, had to sell her car to pay for her lawyer. The blue door is still on my house. It has now become something of a local monument. One neighbor said she looks at it and feels hope. I think that is dramatic, but sweet. In the comments, someone wrote, Nancy thought she was intimidating a little old lady. Turns out she picked a fight with Excel in human form, and I kind of want to frame that. Our next Reddit post is from Town Cry Later. I drive tow trucks for the city, and honestly, this job has taught me that the average human being would park a car inside their own living room if they saw a sign that said "Do not park here." Last week, I got called to a private school because a white SUV was parked in an emergency lane next to the infirmary. Not double parked. Not there for just a minute, actually on the lane, blocking a school ambulance. When I got there, I found the owner of the car. Classic Karen model, too many highlights, sunglasses on her head, expensive leggings, and the expression of someone who had never heard the word no without demanding a manager afterward. She was standing outside the vehicle, talking on the phone and pointing at a teacher like she was directing an invasion. The teacher was nearly in tears because an elementary school kid had gotten sick, and the medical staff were trying to clear space for the ambulance to get in. Karen, meanwhile, was very busy explaining that she had only parked there because those spots are always empty. Anyway, that she just needed to pick up her daughter real quick. And her dialect apparently meant 20 minutes. I asked for the keys. She laughed in my face, said I couldn't touch her car, that her husband knew important people, that municipal towing was legalized theft, that I should get a real job. Always moving to hear that from people whose greatest professional skill appears to be parking. Like they are playing drunk battleship. I explained that it was an emergency zone, then the car would be removed. She started recording on her phone, of course. This new subspecies of Karen seems to think filming their own nervous breakdown automatically turns a crime into content. She walked toward the truck, stood in front of the hook, and said, "I'd like to see you lay a finger on it." Then the man sitting on a school bench, wearing a cap, polo shirt, and the exhausted face of someone who had already seen enough, stood up. He had been there for a few minutes, silently watching the whole thing. I had assumed he was just another grandfather waiting for a grandkid. He was not. He was the deputy municipal secretary of traffic. He was at that school because the city was reviewing emergency access protocols after the daycare incidents. He had come without an entourage specifically to observe the normal flow, and it's the supernatural Karen gift for incriminating themselves in high definition. He got the full show. She still didn't know who he was when she turned to him and said, "Are you seeing this? This hillbilly is trying to steal my car." The man showed his badge. Her face collapsed like an underbaked cake, but she still tried. Said she was a mother, that she was under stress, that nobody there understood the chaos of a woman's life, that they were targeting her because she was direct. The secretary replied with something truly magnificent, almost musical. "Mom, the ambulance does not enter on speeches. It enters on space," and that was the end of the nonsense. I told the SUV while she screamed that it would cost us our jobs. Around us, parents watch, kids watch. One little boy even asked his mother whether that woman had robbed a bank. Honestly, the energy matched. Her daughter, by the way, showed up in the middle of all this. She couldn't have been more than 11. She looked at her mother, looked at the car being lifted onto the truck, and said, without a trace of emotion, "I told you not to park there. That child was born tired." The update. The video Karen recorded ended up being used by the city itself because it perfectly showed the obstruction of the emergency area and her refusal to obey a lawful order. Heavy fine, towing fee, temporary suspension of her vehicle access permission at the school, and an official note sent to all parents. They say her husband picked up the car from the impound lot in total funeral silence. I imagine he finally did meet important people, the cashier and the clerk at the front window. In the comments, someone wrote, she thought she was threatening a tow truck driver. In reality, she was filming an educational PSA. Entirely fair. Our last Reddit post is from Alfredo Sassanope. I manage a small family-owned Italian restaurant. One of those places where half the customers come back because they love the food, and the other half come back because they love feeling superior to the people serving it. 2 weeks ago, we had a final boss Karen. Her name was Lori. Lori came in with 3 friends, all dressed like the judging panel of a cruelty pageant. They sat down, ordered Prosecco, requested impossible menu changes, and treated our youngest waiter, Matteo, like he was a traffic cone that had somehow learned to walk. Matteo is 22, kind to an almost irritating degree, and speaks English with a slight Colombian accent. which, for certain Karens, is apparently an open invitation to barbarism. Everything went relatively badly until the main course, when Lori complained that the risotto was too creamy, which is a little like complaining that ice is cold, but anyway. Matteo offered to replace it. Lori responded by asking if he even knew how to read the order, or if he had just memorized a handful of words to get a job. The whole restaurant heard it. Matteo froze. I stepped closer. Before I could say anything, a woman in her 50s at the next table put down her fork and said, in a clear voice, "Would you like to repeat that?" Lori turned immediately, with the automatic contempt of someone who had never faced consequences in her life. "That's none of your business," the woman replied. "It is now." Dramatic pause. And this is where context matters. That woman was Judge Ellen of Varela, from the county court. She had been a regular at the restaurant for years, discreet, polite, good tipper. And one very important detail, Matteo's mother. Lori had no idea. Instead of apologizing, which would already have been a statistical miracle, Lori made it worse. She said it wasn't her fault that the boy was too sensitive and that people like him needed to learn how to deal with real customers. One of the friends tried to tug her arm. That universal body language for the love of God, shut up. But Lori had clearly been possessed by a spirit of public humiliation. The judge stood up. She didn't yell. She didn't make a scene, which was much worse. Elegant people destroying someone at normal volume is almost a religious experience. She said she knew her son's character, that she knew exactly what kind of worker and man he was, and that cruel people confuse kindness with weakness, because they had never been forced to look at their own reflection for very long. She also said the restaurant had cameras, witnesses, and every right to remove service. Lori clapped. Actually clapped. Wow, so now we've got a mommy defender. Cute. I was about half a second away from kicking all four of them out, but the judge took something out of her purse and set it on the table. It wasn't a badge. It was a business card. Circuit judge. The sound that came from that table was a silence so loud it could have been poured into a glass and served. One of the friends covered her face with her hand. Another muttered, "Oh my God," and sounded genuinely sincere. Lori stared at the card as if maybe it might transform into a coupon and save her. It did not. I ended the service right there. The bill included only the drinks they had already consumed. Lori started saying she was going to destroy the restaurant in reviews, sue for discrimination, call the press. The judge replied, "You are free to write whatever you wish. I only suggest that you be as brave online as you were with the boy who was working." That would already have been enough of a massacre, but life decided to roast one more layer. Lori was a real estate agent. One of our customers recognized her, posted the story in a local group. And since the town is small and boredom is large, within 24 hours half the county had seen the video from Table 6. The real estate agency where Lori worked released a statement saying, "It does not condone discriminatory or abusive behavior, a corporate way of saying she was insufferable in 4000, and now she is no longer our problem." The final update got even better. Matteo received piles of support messages, extra tips the following week, and even an internship offer from a law office made by a couple who had witnessed the entire scene. The kid wants to study law next year. Honestly, after that night, he already has training in oral argument and entrance against country club sociopaths. In the comments, someone wrote, "Lori went out to dinner thinking she would step on a waiter. She ended up serving as an example. Cruel, tight, perfect." Those were 5 Karens who messed with the wrong people. And the big lesson, in case anyone still needs one, is this: screaming at strangers in public is a risky hobby. Sometimes the stupid employee is an auditor. Sometimes the woman in a hoodie flies planes. Sometimes the little old lady living alone can follow money better than the police. Sometimes the tow truck hillbilly is standing next to the man who signs the fines. And sometimes the sensitive waiter is the son of the only person in the room who can destroy you without raising your voice. If you have a favorite or a Karen who deserved an even worse punishment, tell me. Because honestly, I still think the coupon lady got off easy.